What's going on, everyone? Thanks so much for tuning in to another episode of the Ducks Dish podcast. I'm your host, Max Torres with ScoopDuck on 3, coming to you on Tuesday, March the 11th, 2025, from a gloomy and a little bit rainy Long Beach, California. I love myself a rainy day and excited to have you guys here. Thank you for being here for another episode of the pod. I'm joined by ScoopDuck owner and publisher Justin Hopkins. J Hop, I got a two-part question for you. First, how was your little weekend getaway to Las Vegas? And I'm drinking a little bit of grape juice here on the pod. How do you feel about grape juice?
The second part's easy. I only like grape juice if I'm out on the golf course drinking a transfusion. So, which means it includes vodka in it. But the first part, Vegas was great. The weather was great. Got some really good sunshine. I was there for my son in a soccer tournament. So it wasn't like I went down to Vegas to get, completely drunk and run around and gambling and stuff. But we did have some fun. Didn't go to any shows. Got some great food. Wandered around the strip a little bit, wandered around Fremont, Top Golf, the Tiger Woods, Pop Stroke, which is like his new thing. Like it's like Top Golf, but putt golf. So yeah, we did some fun stuff and I got to watch him play and had a really fun time doing that. And it was a good trip.
Sweet, sweet. Glad you had the chance to do that and be the supportive dad that you are. So we love it. We got a big story to get into on today's episode of the pod, Justin. Some big news that came down yesterday. Four-star defensive lineman Bott Mulitalo announcing that he would be decommitting from Oregon here in the 2026 class. This comes on the heels of an unofficial visit to Washington for the Huskies Junior Day in Seattle. So you can kind of read the tea leaves a little bit if you want. I know plenty of people on social media are. Maybe that means that the Huskies could be the team to beat. I just learned recently that he has a connection with the defensive line coach on Jed Fish's staff. I think that I was told it was his uncle. So that was a little bit of a surprise here. And from some of the conversations that I've had, it caught the Ducks a little bit by surprise. So what'd you make of this development?
Yeah. It's really hard where you it's one of those things. First off, I'm not going to bash the kid. That's not my point, but it's really hard to say, I guess in a nutshell, the way I would characterize it is I think Bott Mulitalo probably and his camp probably didn't communicate things the best, which happens with 16, 17, 18-year-old kids. And I know that from firsthand experience because I have a few of them of my own. And so I think that some of that miscommunication, maybe could have been, relayed to Oregon and handled a little bit differently. But at the end of the day, let's just take this on the surface for what it is. Clearly, someone or several people got in Mulitalo's ear about flipping from playing defensive line to playing offensive line. And that's fine. If he wants to play offensive line, play it. I mean, go for it, man. I think if you just take this from the surface, Bott Mulitalo as a defensive player has a lot more value to Oregon than as an offensive player. And of course, that would be, offensive line or defensive line. He's looking like he's potentially around a 250, 260 offensive tackle. And with the way the recruiting board is set up, I probably wouldn't have said that most years. But this year, with the way the recruiting board is set up for Oregon, and you're basically probably guaranteed to be in the top two for Jackson Cantwell at the moment. And you're basically in the top two for Emmanuel Ahenicho right now, top two at the moment. Those are the top two tackles, offensive tackles in the country. So that's what I mean by having value. You're not going to sign 4 tackles in this class. You're not going to sign 5 tackles in this class. So if Oregon can get Cantwell or Ahenicho or both, kind of a different, situation. So, and of course there's, Obot out in Idaho that Oregon is in the, what did he do, a top 5 or top 6 recently, whatever his list was. Oregon's one of the top contenders there too. So again, this isn't like we didn't want him anyways, he sucks. That's not the case. But when he's on the list as a defensive tackle, which was where he was ranked by everybody 24/7 on 3, I think there's a lot more value there. If he's flipping to the other side of the ball, clearly USC, Washington, others have needs on either side of the line of scrimmage, and Oregon is in a position where they can be a little bit more selective. So it's just different.
And I read a story yesterday after this news came out, Justin. I believe it was from Blair and Gula over at 247 that essentially was quoting Mulitalo saying that I'm changing to offensive line. I want to focus on that moving forward in my recruitment. So now I kind of have to see how schools view me and who wants me as an offensive lineman. So I'm not going to say anything negative about him either. That is totally his decision to make, and I wish him all the best. But for Oregon, I think that if you could afford to lose a guy at one position, it would probably be the defensive line, which I almost hesitate to say a little bit because we know there's still a lot of smoke around Tamuhini Tapoy, the modern day defensive lineman committed to Oregon. He took another trip out to USC this week. Maybe we'll talk about that a little bit later on today. But you're right. Oregon's offensive line board is just loaded with really top tier guys. And we just don't know right now if Mulitalo is or will become one of those guys at offensive line. So they already have Cody Green, a modern day offensive tackle, and a guy who has really seen his stock rise on the recruiting trail. He's already committed in this class, but we know that USC and Texas are battling there, but he has official visits set to all three schools, including Oregon. And then just echoing more of what you said about Cantwell, Ahinacho, and some other top guys, Kelvin Abba out there in Idaho. So we'll see how this thing develops, but the Ducks still have Tony Cumberland, Viliami Mwala, Tom, who we just talked about, and Dutch Horse committed here in the 2026 class. And there's other big names that they're going after, specifically Anthony Jones, the 5-star edge out of Mobile, Alabama, Richard Wesley, the 2026 defensive lineman out of Sierra Canyon, and then Derek Coleman Brusso, the 2026 edge out of Seattle. So they were already going after other elite guys on the recruiting trail at the position, but still, you'd rather have Bott in the fold than not. So they're just going to have to move forward accordingly.
Well, and to piggyback on what you just said, you'd rather have Bott in the fold as a defensive line commit than not at all. And I agree with that. But, if we just look at the offensive tackle board, which is where he would fit in, if we just said, hey, where does this guy stack up? He's behind everybody we mentioned. He's behind Cody Green. He's behind Cantwell. He's behind Ahinacho, and he's behind Obot. So the reality is Oregon's probably only going to get two of those guys. They might get three. That's going to be really tough, but they're probably only going to get two of those guys. And so that means, Bott Mulitalo as an offensive tackle is the odd man out. So it is what it is. It doesn't look good on the surface. No doubt you never want to lose your 4-star, commits anytime. But, we kind of got to take a look at this thing from a logical standpoint. You got to take a look at it the way Dane Lanning is, and he's building a roster. He's not in a position like others where it's like, oh, I got to get as many high-ranked guys committed as I can, so our ranking looks really good. They're filling out a roster. And Oregon, again, if we're banking on anybody making a splash in November and December with top-ranked recruits, Oregon's going to be one of the schools you mentioned as being a player for guys that are, highly coveted prospects around the country.
The last thing I'll add here on this topic with Mulitalo, Justin, I know that I saw some of our readers over at ScoopDuck talking on the message boards about this, and I'm sure other Oregon fans that are maybe watching us or listening to us are kind of echoing this, but just like it's been a little while since Oregon had some positive momentum on the recruiting trail. It feels like it's been a little bit negative recently, obviously with Jonas Williams flipping to USC and then Bott backing off his commitment now. But the thing that I would say to that is that you have to remind yourself here the context. Oregon entered the spring window with about 10 or so guys committed. So they're not in the same position as a lot of these other schools are where they have like Clemson right now. They are the hottest team in the country without a doubt, but they are filling up their class and kind of getting this ball rolling some more versus Oregon, who entered with all those guys already in the fold. So I think the positive momentum, if you're looking for it, is hanging on to a guy like Green, hanging on to a guy like Tom if you can, and then continuing to bring in these high profile visitors. And I know that we're going to talk about one here in just a sec.
Well, and I guess let's just look at it this way, a really quick comparison. As we know, every player has a value, and Oregon basically operates within an NIL budget every year. And Oregon's battling for Tom with USC right now. So if, a guy like Bott Mulitalo goes elsewhere, you obviously have whatever commitment NIL-wise there. Clearly you're battling for Tom with USC. Maybe that money allocates so that you're able to keep Tom in the fold. And let's be real, that's the of the two, that's the one you want to keep committed no matter what. So yeah, you'd like to get them all. I have no doubt Oregon's going to be fine. And again, there's zero reason for Oregon to make its best offer in March, right? If you're going to the betting table and setting up for your best offer, you're going to do that in November, December. You're not going to do that in March.
Keeping things rolling here on the Ducks Dish podcast. Plenty of recruiting talk for you guys here on a Tuesday. If you're watching us on the ScoopDuck YouTube channel, do us a favor, hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. It really helps us out. And if you're listening to us, consider following us or subscribing to us on whatever platform you're listening on. So let's keep things rolling with another big development. Justin, as 2026 five-star quarterback Jared Curtis is set to wrap up his multi-day unofficial visit to Oregon later on this afternoon, early evening. I know this was one that you wrote about a little bit on the boards for our subscribers earlier on today, but not much of a surprise. It seems like the visit's gone pretty well with Curtis in Oregon. I think this is a guy that they were obviously incredibly prepared for. He came all the way across the country with his family. He was the only recruit in town. So it seems like they were able to really roll out the red carpet here in what has quickly become one of the most important recruitments for Dan Lanning and the Ducks here in the 2026 cycle.
Yeah, it's a momentum changer for Dan Lanning, with this class potentially. You're looking at one of the top players in the country, a five-star from the Southeast, the number one ranked quarterback. Even regardless of all that, you flip on the tape and you watch this kid wing the ball around. He's pretty friggin' special. Like, this is, not a polished transfer that you're getting. This is a guy you could bring in and maybe, keep him warm for a year, or he does have the potential to come in and be the guy right away. You never know. So I think that this is big because, as we know, as you can start getting those elite guys out of the Southeast, more and more will follow. Maybe not necessarily just in 2026, but in classes behind them. So, and again, I think if you're Dan Lanning and you sat him down to have an honest conversation, he would say, hey, look, I would love for us to get a highly ranked prep guy that we could come in and develop and run our offense around for a couple years versus the transfers. Nothing wrong with the transfers. I think it would just be a nice change of pace in a way for them to escape whatever little, Oregon doesn't develop players, mantra you're hearing out of Washington and Los Angeles. So a lot of things that this one, checks the boxes of, and it's going to be close. Not to mention you're going head to head with Kirby Smart in Georgia. That would be a pretty big statement win on the recruiting trail as well.
It would be a massive win on the recruiting trail because I don't believe, Justin, that Oregon has beaten Georgia outright for a recruit. I mean, in my time covering the Ducks, I want to say, the most recent head-to-head that comes to mind for me is former five-star linebacker Justin Williams out of the state of Texas, who was down to Oregon and Georgia, and he ended up committing to Georgia. And I don't even think he played that much as a true freshman. But now we're here looking ahead to the 2025 season, seeing workout videos of Justin Williams and kind of saying, oh, dang, I totally forgot about that guy. But he was someone that really, really loved Oregon. Something else to note here in the Curtis recruitment kind of over the weekend or early into the week has been Georgia's continued pursuit of quarterbacks not named Jared Curtis in the 2026 recruiting class. Most notably, Bo Bentley, the 26 quarterback out of the state of Texas. And then more recently here this week, 2026 Oklahoma quarterback commit Jaden O'Neal, originally from Southern California, recently announced that he would be enrolling at Mustang High School, I believe it is, in the state of Oklahoma to finish out his high school career and play his senior season. So as we've seen with other programs, you're looking at guys with Oregon, Tony Cumberland, Viliami Mwala transferring to local Eugene schools. I think that probably suggests that O'Neal is pretty locked in with the Sooners, but he visited Georgia. I know Rusty Menzel reported that over at Dogs HQ. So that was also an interesting development because Curtis was just on his trip to Oregon and he's also scheduled to visit Georgia now this week. So that was another development that caught my eye and doesn't seem to indicate, at least on the surface, a strong amount of confidence in where things are at with Jared Curtis. What do you think?
No, I agree. Actions speak louder than words. Look at what they're doing. These are not, offers, that they made months ago. You know what I mean? And maybe they're circling. These are new offers. It's clearly they are preparing, I guess you could say, not to land Jared Curtis. How about that? So we're not guaranteeing he ends up at Oregon, but clearly Georgia is preparing to not land Jared Curtis. And obviously the reason for that would be because he went to Oregon. So, visit here has gone well. You and I are recording this on a Tuesday. He's still in Eugene and will be there for the duration of the day before flying out Wednesday morning to head back to Tennessee. And then, of course, goes to Georgia. So I know everybody's clamoring for news on this and wanting every last tidbit, but, the visit's not even finished yet. And it seems pretty clear that I think he's going to take this Georgia visit. So, assuming that's the case, there's really not going to be any finite news on this until next week, until both these visits are done, the family gets home and has a chance to talk about it. And we're able to compare notes on how the Georgia side is feeling and the Oregon side is feeling. And, and let's be real. NIL is going to be a part of this. So maybe, one of these sides is holding on to their best offer until the last minute. And I don't think Jared Curtis is purely an NIL play. That's not what I'm saying. I'm not saying that about this recruitment. I think for the two sides, you're really just going to have to be competitive in your offer, and that's what it's going to take. I don't think anybody's going to be able to just buy his commitment outright.
Yeah, if you're looking to get a 5-star quarterback, much less the number 1 rated guy at his position, I think that you got to be ready to pony up in the NIL game. And we know that Oregon is going to be aggressive and competitive in that realm. That's been the case for a couple of years, and I think it'll continue to be the case. Let's talk about one more recruit here, Justin. He's definitely been a big name in the Oregon recruiting world, and that is 2026 linebacker Talanoa Ili. Talanoa Ili is scheduled to return to Eugene for, I believe, his 4th overall visit this Thursday, March 13th, when the Ducks kick off spring practice in Eugene. He also, according to Chad Simmons, was at USC, or is at USC, I should say, today, making the nearby stop in Los Angeles. And then you're also looking at Oklahoma. It looks like Simmons also reported that he was at Oklahoma on Monday for a visit with the Sooners. And we both have our predictions in for Talanoa Ili to land in Eugene. I still feel pretty good about that. I'm trying to get another interview before and after this visit with Ili. And the interesting wrinkle here, Justin, that we have to talk about, Greg Biggins over at 247 reported that Ili is going to be transferring to Kahuku High School in Honolulu, Hawaii, to finish out his high school career, which is just a massive development for one of the best defenders in the entire Trinity League.
Yeah, that's an interesting development for sure. The transfer down to Hawaii, and I guess the immediate question is what does that mean for Oregon? I don't think it means anything. It doesn't mean anything for Oregon. It doesn't mean anything for USC. It's just, it is what it is. Quite frankly, if I had the ability to be a senior and go do my senior year in Hawaii, I would do it too, but I didn't have that option. So, right now, yeah, you and I have our pick to Oregon. I think it's imperative that he makes this trip this week. I think USC has really turned things up and has at the very least made things interesting. So this is yet another battle that we're seeing Oregon and USC kind of go head to head for. And we'll just have to see how it plays out. Again, I do think USC is going to win some of these battles, whether it be Tom, whether it be, Talanoa, whatever, maybe Delvin Benjamin, whatever the case might be. But I also think that, you're going to see a lot of these recruitments, if that's the case, not be done here in March or April. I mean, if somehow USC can flip Tom, or if USC lands Talanoa Ili or something to that effect, Oregon's not going to go away quietly. So I think that's just going to be round one of however many rounds we get out of those recruitments. So a lot to unfold. And here's the thing, people want to kind of bitch and moan about, I don't like the drama. And the drama's fun. Like, that's why we're here, right? To follow this stuff, to see where it ends up, to watch the battle of Lincoln Riley versus Dan Lanning and other battles, Kirby Smart and Dan Lanning. Like, the drama's fun. This right here, wins and losses on Talanoa Ili or Tom flipping. Yeah, it's fun and maybe it gets your blood boiling or makes you feel excited or whatever, but it has no real impact on your daily life. And if it does, you might want to go see a therapist a little bit.
Those are
maybe
the diehards.
just a little bit. But you get my point. We're here for entertainment. We're here for this. By now, we know we can trust Dan Lanning and Marshall Malco and the guys to build the right roster at Oregon. However, it gets there, whether that means they get a bunch of commitments in March or whether they make a late surge in December. Oregon's going to get theirs. But it certainly looks like Lincoln Riley and USC might be done being a doormat. So at least right now, it appears that way. So we'll see how this unfolds. And I'm just excited to follow the drama for the next 8-9 months.
Yeah, the drama is good because it gives us something to talk about selfishly as journalists, right, and podcasters. But we'll do our very best to keep you guys up to date on all things Talanoa Ili over on ScoopDuck.com. Don't forget you can try us out for a week for just $1. Also consider signing up for our free newsletter. Download the On3 app and come and see us at ScoopDuck.com. It's a great time. We have a great time and we love our community over there. Last topic for today, Justin. Maybe we'll get into this a little bit more tomorrow or in another podcast soon, but Oregon spring practice starts on Thursday. The Ducks will have 2 practices this week, Thursday and Saturday, before going on spring break, stopping things for 2 weeks, and then going balls to the wall, full steam ahead in April as we approach that spring game scheduled for April 26th. So when you think spring ball, Justin, what comes to your mind?
It's an interesting question because it used to be when spring ball came, it was the excitement of, basically being able to have somebody go to some of the practices and cover them a little bit and hearing from the coaches afterwards. And this year, as we know, the first 2 practices are not open to the media whatsoever. So, and I get it. I think I've been pretty clear with fans for a while. Dan Lanning, I mean, if you just look at what he's done since he's been here, he's continuing to close things off. And that's his look. He's an $11 million man now. His paycheck is based on outcomes of wins, losses, seasons, stuff like that. So it's his job, his right to run this organization as he sees fit. I understand fans don't like it. I don't love it. But as long as he keeps winning, he can get away with it. So that's just how this works. So yeah, I'm excited for spring. I would have to say I'm probably most excited for this spring as maybe I've ever been or been in a long time because there's so many new faces. There's so many position groups that are wide open, right? I think we have an idea of some of the guys that are going to step into roles, but there's a lot of healthy competition that's going to take place this spring. And you ultimately might see guys transfer out of this program that you and I have decent expectations for because of that healthy competition. So, that kind of subtraction is typically an addition by subtraction at any school. If you're not going to compete, if you're afraid to compete, best of luck to you. So, you look at the defensive back group, there's going to be a lot of healthy battles there. Pretty clear that I think we all expect Dante Moore to be the guy leading this team, but who's the guy behind him? Who's going to be the number 2? What does this offense look like with Dante Moore? Is it much different? Is it a lot of the same? Is there, more deep balls? What are we going to see this fall? We won't get those questions answered this spring. I'm fully aware of that. But again, I think there's just a lot of excitement to hear about these new faces. And even if it's just through the voices of the coaches in coach speak after practice, we're still here for it. It's still going to be fun. And best of all, you still get a spring game because Oregon ain't no quitter.
And that's something that I'm excited for too, and can certainly be grateful for. Just something as simple as having new quotes to read or write about or listen to, and gaining that perspective into what the 2025 version of Oregon football is going to look like. And I'll echo your point about the new faces, and I think we can all honestly call it uncertainty, which seems like it's a more negative term, but I'm looking at it as more maybe the unknown, and just the excitement that comes from that for me is a guy who covered a lot of these guys as recruits coming out of high school. And here we are in 2025, and it looks like they might have their shot to step into a bigger role. A guy like Dakota Fields, a guy like Ifeoma Badegwu, someone like a Dink Riggs with some snaps up for grabs in the Rashad Samples backfield. There's so much I'm excited for. Young faces on the D line after the Ducks lost Birch and Harmon and Jamari Caldwell. there's a lot to be excited for, and I'm here for all of it. So I will say I'm a little bit bummed at how Oregon structures their spring practice, because it's like, here's a little taste, and then we're just going to take 2 weeks off. But when things get rocking and rolling in April, Scoop Duck's going to be the place to be, because we are going to be talking all about it and covering the heck out of it.
Yeah, and again, the way they do that, these guys get a spring break, which I think is healthy for them, for their mental, because let's be honest, it's not like the season ended and these guys just took off and got to take 2 months off. That's far from the truth. They've been doing winter workouts. They've been doing, there's not many days off when you're a football player at this level. So I think it's important for these guys to get a spring break, to take advantage, to get their minds right. And it is hard for it to be broken up, but I understand. Secondly, you allow any of those maybe spring transfers to be able to make it for 90% of spring ball. So a lot of value in the way they do it. Lastly, with the way they do it, it pushes the last practice, or the spring game, if you will, to after that portal window closes in April. So a lot of good, just the way it's structured makes a lot of sense. But yeah, it's also just kind of weird too, a little bit.
I think putting the spring game when they did was just a big ace, big W move by Dan Lanning. When you're a coach that has to do all they can to navigate the craziness that is the transfer portal now. So I can't wait for all of it. I'm going to be all over it, as I know Justin will be as well over at ScoopDuck. So come and see us at scoopduck.com and subscribe to the channel here if you guys are listening. If you want to find more of Justin, you can find him anywhere at jhopkinssd. You can find me anywhere, most recently TikTok at Torres Sports. Check out some of that short form content. And do us a favor and share the show. Share the Ducks Dish podcast with everyone you know. And until next time, thanks for tuning in to another episode of the Ducks Dish podcast.